चलिए गाइस शुरू करते हैं डेवलपमेंट इकोनॉमिक्स। एज द नेम सजेस्ट, हम डेवलपमेंट इकोनॉमिक्स में मेनली ये देखेंगे कि वाई सम कंट्रीज़ आर डेवलपिंग सो फास्ट और क्यों कुछ कंट्रीज़ डेवलप बहुत सालों के बाद भी उतना नहीं कर पा रही। सो बिफोर आई स्टार्ट, राइटिंग के लिए मैं पहले माफ़ी चाहूँगा। चलिए, तो हमारा पहला चैप्टर है मैक्रो इकोनॉमिक हिस्ट्री। इन स्टडिंग हिस्ट्री वी टेक द लॉन्ग व्यू एंड ट्राई टू एक्सप्लेन वाई द मेनी इनोवेशंस एंड प्रैक्टिसेस डिड नॉट रीच एवरी पार्ट ऑफ द वर्ल्ड। और आपको ये मानना पड़ेगा, बहुत सारी इनोवेशंस और प्रैक्टिसेस की वजह से ही कुछ देश बहुत अमीर हैं और कुछ देश उतने अमीर नहीं हैं। सर ऐसे कैसे बेटा? यूएसए क्यों इतना अमीर है? क्योंकि इनोवेशंस के बेसिस पर वो इतना आगे गया। तो हम देखते हैं कौन कौन से टूल्स हैं हिस्ट्री में जो हमें हेल्प करेंगे ये बताने में कि कौन से देश जो डेवलप करे वो कौन से बेसिस पर करे। तो पहले है जीडीपी एज अ मेजरिंग रॉड। वेल, टू नो द इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ वी लुक फॉर जीडीपी विच रेफर्स टू द वैल्यू ऑफ ऑल फाइनल गुड्स दैट आर प्रोड्यूस्ड बाय इट्स रेजिडेंट्स इन अ गिवन ईयर। इट इज़ अ मेजर ऑफ एन इकोनॉमीज टोटल आउटपुट। जीडीपी ऑल्सो मेजर्स नेशनल इनकम टू। तो कोई भी देश डेवलप है या नहीं है, सबसे बढ़िया तरीका ये जानने का है उसका जीडीपी देख लिया जाए। एडजस्टिंग फॉर डिफरेंसेस इन कॉस्ट ऑफ लिविंग अक्रॉस द वर्ल्ड, बेसिकली पैरिटी बना के परचेजिंग पावर की। Global income per head today is about $8,000 a year, but for most of humanity's past, people have been poor. The economist Angus Madison has estimated that at the beginning of our common era, the per capita income was about $515 in today's prices. Again, वो adjust करके. It means that the average person 2,000 years ago enjoyed not much more than $1 a day. Extreme poverty. Madison also suggested that the distribution of income 2000 years ago was pretty much equal. तो इसका मतलब यही है कि लोग अमूमन सारे गरीब ही थे। Almost everyone everywhere was very poor. It would appear that regional disparities became significant only from the beginning of 19th century. तो लास्ट 200 सालों में जो एकदम ड्रामेटिक चेंजेस आए, कुछ देश बहुत ही अमीर बन गए, कुछ उतने अमीर नहीं बने, वही बेसिकली हम पढ़ना चाह रहे हैं, देखना चाह रहे हैं व्हाई सच थिंग हैपेंड। बिकॉज सिग्निफिकेंट became significant only from the beginning of 19th century. Income per head in Western Europe had by then become 3 times then in Africa, but world income per head was still only $755. तो अगर आप कंपेयर करो बेटा तो 515 से 755, so कोई बहुत ज़्यादा आगे नहीं। In today's prices, meaning that it has increased by less than 50% over a 1800-year period, amounting to an annual growth rate of under 0.02%, whereas as the annual growth of income per head has been about 2% a year over the past 4 decades. Large regional disparities in income are also less than 200 years old. The ratio of the average income in US and Africa had risen from 3 at the beginning of 19th century to more than 20 today, about $38,000 compared to 1850 per year. तो बताइए 200 साल पहले अफ्रीका में और यूएसए में 3 टाइम्स का फ़र्क था, जो कि बढ़कर 20 टाइम्स हो गया बच्चे लास्ट 200 ईयर्स में। Real GDP per capita in the US has grown 30 times in size in 200 years, implying that the average annual growth rate of income per person there had been about 1.7%. In a sad contrast, income per year in Ethiopia is about the same today as it was 200 years ago. चेरिश कीजिए जो आप पढ़ाई कर रहे हैं। Not many people can have the access to these particular informations. आप सोचिए एक ऐसा देश जो 200 साल पहले जो उनकी पर कैपिटा इनकम थी आज भी इतनी ही है। इट्स नॉट अ जोक। 200 years ago is a hell lot of a time. If you were to line up countries according to GDP per capita today, you would find 2 clusters, one poor जिसको हम बोलते हैं Desta's world, and the other rich, Becky's world. There are middle income nations spread them thinly between the extremes, that is China, Brazil, Argentina, but a large cluster of countries in sub-Saharan Africa, Indian subcontinent, Southeast Asia, Central America, with a total population of 2.3 billion, produce an average of $2,100 a year per head, while another smaller cluster like Europe, North America, Australia and Japan, with a population of little under 1 billion, enjoys an average annual income of $30,000. Look at that, $2,100. Look at this, $30,000. In contrast to poor countries, agriculture output is a small fraction of national income in the rich world. और ये आपको शुरू से ही बताया गया इकोनॉमिक्स में कि जो भी देश तरक्की करते हैं वहाँ पर एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर डिमिनिश करता है। The share of agriculture in GDP about 25% in the poor world, less than 5% in rich countries, less than 10% of the population in rich countries lives in rural areas. In contrast, more than 70% of people in poor countries live in villages. Thus, ecology is of direct concern to the world's poor in a way it isn't to the world's rich. तो गरीब देश गांव में ज़्यादा रहेंगे लोग, अमीर देश शहरों में ज़्यादा रहेंगे, अर्बनाइजेशन ज़्यादा होगा. तो अब अगर इंटरेस्ट क्रिएट हो गया इस टॉपिक पे तो यू मस्ट बी क्यूरियस, सर हुआ कैसे, गरीब इतना गरीब, अमीर इतना अमीर, ऐसा ये क्या चमत्कार हुआ है, क्या रीजंस हैं इसके. तो आइए पढ़ते हैं कॉजेज बिहाइंड डिफरेंस बिटवीन रिच एंड पुअर कंट्रीज. People in rich countries have better equipment to work with. So one argument goes that the accumulation of physical capital in Beck's world has been a significant contributor to the high standard of living. America, they use computers, तो बढ़िया से अच्छे से काम हो जाता है, प्रोडक्टिविटी बहुत ज़्यादा है. अफ्रीकन कंट्रीज़, बहुत सारी कंट्रीज़ में कंप्यूटर यूज़ करना नहीं आता या है नहीं अवेलेबल, तो ऑब्वियसली प्रोडक्टिविटी कम हो जाती है. People in rich countries are far better educated, implying that they are able to make use of ideas to produce goods that are out of the reach for people in countries where large number are illiterate. आपने चैप्टर सेम 4 में चैप्टर 4 मैक्रो इकोनॉमिक्स में गया था, जनरेशन ऑफ आइडियाज़, जिसमें हम पढ़ते थे कि आइडियाज़ डेवलपमेंट कितनी ज़रूरी होती है ग्रोथ के लिए. अरे आइडिया डेवलपमेंट तभी होगा जब एजुकेशन होगी, और अगर आइडिया डेवलप्ड भी है उनको यूज़ भी आगे करना है, उसके लिए भी एजुकेशन चाहिए भाई. Allied to education is health. Life expectancy at birth in rich countries 78 years, whereas it is about 58 years in poor countries. तो बंदा जब जिएगा कम तो काम भी कम ही कर पाएगा ना. Relatively clean water, good hygiene have reduced morbidity in rich countries greatly. Morbidity rather. About 1/4 of the population in the poor world suffer from undernourishment, whereas the corresponding figure in rich countries negligible. अरे भूखा आदमी भूखे पेट वजन नहीं होता, काम कैसे होएगा. बीमार आदमी कैसे काम करेगा. Taken together, the average person in the rich world is capable of supplying work of far higher quality and far many more years than his counterpart in a poor country. Education and health go by the name human capital. जब छोटे छोटे बच्चे होते थे 12वीं क्लास में, इंडियन इको में पढ़ते नहीं थे ह्यूमन कैपिटल, 5 सोर्सेज पढ़ाते थे तुम्हें टीचर, एजुकेशन, हेल्थ, ट्रेनिंग, माइग्रेशन, इंफॉर्मेशन. तो मेन तो एजुकेशन और हेल्थ ही होते थे ना. यस और नो. चलो. Many economists, however, regard the production of new idea as the primary factor behind economic progress. They say that rich countries have become rich because people there have been successful in producing ideas not only for new product but also for cheaper ways of producing old products. Another reason is population growth. A country's population growth is affected not just by net reproduction but by net immigration and the age distribution too. In order to isolate net reproduction, it is common practice to work with the fertility rate, which is the number of live births a woman expect to deliver over her life. आपके देश में कितनी पॉपुलेशन है वो भी आपके जीडीपी को अफेक्ट करेगी इन बोथ वेज, पॉजिटिव एंड नेगेटिव. तो अगर आप रोमस मॉडल लो तो पॉपुलेशन बढ़ना इज़ अ गुड थिंग. आप अगर सोलोस का मॉडल लें तो फिर वो कहता है पॉपुलेशन बढ़ना इज़ अ बैड थिंग. सो डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज़ है तो वील गो विद रोमर्स मॉडल, जो कि पॉपुलेशन बढ़ना विल बी गुड थिंग, और अगर डेवलपिंग इकॉनमी अंडर डेवलप्ड है तो फिर पॉपुलेशन बढ़ना इज़ अ बैड थिंग. It is possible to discover the relative importance of the various factors responsible for economic growth. No doubt the answer is different in different places and in different periods of history. But 5 decades ago, Robert Solow showed us to investigate the question. Suppose that over an interval of time, a country's real GDP has increased. Solow and others showed how to attribute that growth to increase in labor force participation, human skills, capital improvement, in the quality of machine and equipment, and so on. Now suppose that when we have added up all the contribution made by these factors of production, we find that the sum falls short of real GDP growth. We then interpret that shortfall as an increase in the overall productivity of the economy's output via capital asset, by which we mean that more output can be produced now than earlier, even if the amount of such factors of production as machines and equipments. So basically Solow model को ही explain किया, and skill has remained the same. This is a formal way of acknowledging that there has been a general rise in efficiency with which goods are produced. Economists call this total factor productivity. How does the later growth come about? It comes about when people acquire knowledge, make use of it, or when people make better use of what they already know. दैट्स वाई टोटल फैक्टर प्रोडक्टिविटी इज टर्म्ड एज टेक्नोलॉजिकल प्रोग्रेस. पढ़ते थे ना सॉलो में कि इंडेफिनेट ग्रोथ टेक्नोलॉजिकल प्रोग्रेस से आती है बच्चा. However, there are other changes like improvement in the working of institution that can also affect factor productivity. Since the Second World War, growth in total factor productivity in the rich world has been considerable. During 70 to 2000, the average annual rate of growth of total factor productivity in UK is 0.7%, whereas it declined slightly in sub-Saharan Africa. What do these figures mean? Take the case of UK. The country's real GDP grew at an average annual rate of 2.4%. which means about 29% of the growth. At 2.4% growth rate, real GDP in year 2000 was twice the real GDP in 1970. Nearly one third of that increase can be attributed to growth in total factor productivity. In contrast, the economies in sub-Saharan Africa, where total factor productivity declined during that period, became less efficient in their use of such factors of production as machine and equipment, skills and labor hours. It's hard to believe that people in those countries systematically forgot technical knowledge they had shown in past. It must be due to deterioration in local institution via civil wars and bad governance. आप बताइए ना, प्रोडक्टिविटी डाउन कैसे हो सकती है किसी की? आप कोई पुरानी टेक्नोलॉजी कैसे यूज़ कर लोगे? वो तभी पॉसिबल है जब आपके यहाँ पे अनरेस्ट है, सिविल वॉर्स हो रहे हैं या आपकी गवर्नमेंट ठीक से काम नहीं कर रही. अफ्रीकन मोस्टली कंट्रीज़ में यही हुआ. These statistics raise a puzzle. Today's poor country lie mainly in the tropics, whereas the rich countries are mostly in temperature zones. No doubt tropics are breeding ground for many diseases, but they can also harbor vast quantities of natural resources. During the past several centuries, the countries that are rich have been importing those very resources to fuel their factories and to make their meals enjoyable. They accumulated machine, human capital and technology knowledge. Why did the poor countries could do so? मतलब गरीब देश के पास जो चीज़ है वो अमीर उसी से लेता है, यूज़ करता है और अमीर और तो जा रहा है, गरीब देश कुछ कर नहीं रहा. वाई? इसका मेन रीज़न है कॉलोनाइजेशन. अरे आप भी तो हिंदुस्तानी हो, चाहे पाकिस्तानी हो, चाहे बांग्लादेशी हो, हम सबको कॉलोनी बना के तो रखा गया था भाई. पहले तो सब सेम ही थे. चलिए, कॉलोनाइजेशन इज़ अ पॉसिबल आंसर. आज भी आप अफ्रीकन कंट्रीज़ में जाओ, बहुत सारी कंट्रीज़ में, अफ्रीकन कंट्रीज़ में आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट, मेन लैंग्वेज इज़ फ्रेंच. वाई? बिकॉज फ्रांस की कॉलोनीज थे बहुत सारे. आज भी फ्रेंच बोलते हैं, कितनी आज़ादी होने के बाद, इतने सालों के बाद भी. सोचिए फुटप्रिंट कितना गहरा है. So colonization is a possible answer. Historians have shown that from 16th century, European powers have extracted natural resources from colonies, including cheap labor, but mostly have invested the proceeds domestically. Of course, one should ask why it is that Europeans managed to colonize the tropics, why colonization did not take place the other way around. गरीबों ने क्यों नहीं अमीर देशों पे कब्जा कर लिया? So Jared Diamond has offered the answer. That said, many of the most prominent of those ex-colonies have been politically independent for decades now. With the exception of few examples in South and Southeast Asia, most of the ex-colonies have either remained poor or become poorer still. Why? Institutions. Economic historians such as Robert Fogel, David Launder and Douglas North have argued that rich world is rich today because over the centuries it has devised institutions that have enabled people to improve their material conditions. It means that people in rich countries work with superior technology, are healthier, live longer, are better educated, produce many more productive ideas because they have been able to get on with their lives in society whose institutions permit, even encourage the economy-wide accumulation of factors like machine, transport, facility, health, skills, ideas. इसलिए तो आज अगर आपको बोलूँ माइग्रेट होना है तो आप यूएस से माइग्रेट होगे, आप कनाडा माइग्रेट होगे, आप ऑस्ट्रेलिया माइग्रेट होगे, आप इथोपिया नहीं जाओगे, आप कोई कोई गरीब देश में नहीं जाओगे. क्यों? क्योंकि वहाँ पर इंस्टीट्यूशंस नहीं है to foster your development. The accumulation of productive capital asset is only a proximate cause of prosperity. The real cause is progressive institution. One can peel away the conceptual onion some more and ask how and why past people in today's rich countries were able to fashion their institution in ways that enlarge those causes of prosperity to explode there. One can even ask whether institution did it or whether it was the enlightened policies of the rulers that were responsible. But then policies are not plucked from air. They emerge from consultation, deliberation within institution. Nor it is likely that a policy designed to bring prosperity to a country will actually work unless the institutions are there to implement. These dilemmas are very important for today's poor country. What institution should they adopt? What policy should their government be going for? There is little point in embarking on grandiose projects, grandiose projects, still meals, land reform, public health programs, free education, unless a country's institutions have the necessary checks and balances to limit corruption wastage. Now the question is, how did these institutions that promoted economic growth in today's rich countries become established and flourish? It is very difficult to answer. It is just safe to say that institutions are the explanatory factor that we seek to understand why Becky's and Destas world differ so much. Institutions वो बहुत ज़रूरी हैं, करप्शन फ्री हो, फार साइटेड हो, एंड ये सारी मेन चीज़ें. The Oxford English Dictionary defines institution as an established law, custom, usage, practice, organization or other element in the political or social life of people. Institutions are defined in part by the rules and authority structure that govern collective undertakings, but in part also by the responsibilities they have with outsider. For example, the rules on the factory floor matter not only to members of the firm, they matter to others too. For example, rich countries have laws relating to working conditions in factories. Moreover, environmental regulation constrain what firms are able to do with their affiliates. The effectiveness of an institution depends on the rules governing it and on whether its members obey the rules. The codes of conduct in the civil service of every country include honesty, but government differ enormously as its practice or to its practice. Social scientists have constructed indices of corruption among public officials, like private firms' perception on the bribes they pay to officials in order to do business. तो आपको ना ये समझना चाहिए कि it has a lot to do with your आपकी values क्या हैं as society. The index is on scale 1 highly corrupt, 10 highly clear, is less than 3.5 for most poor country, African and Eastern Europe and among the worst, and greater than 7 for most rich countries. So it is used to argue that bribery of public official help to raise national income because it lubricates economic transaction. It does so in a corrupted world. If you don't pay up, you don't let to do business, you don't get to do business. But corruption is not an inevitable evil. There are several poor countries where corruption is low. Having to pay bribes raise production costs, so less is produced. Citizens suffer because the price they have to pay is that much higher. Economists have speculated that government corruption is related to delays people face in having the rule of law enforced. In a way, delays promote bribes to faster legal process. For example, a contract takes 415 days in the poor world as against 280 days in the rich world. To register a business takes 66 days in the poor world and 27 days in the rich world. Some economists have suggested that government officials in poor countries create lengthy queues so as to elicit bribes from applicants if they want to jump queues. अब आप देखो बाहर के देशों में आप मतलब आपको सिटीजनशिप तक बेचते हैं, ये बेचते हैं. आप बताओ इससे बड़ा क्या तरीका होगा पैसा कमाने का. Other things being equal, a country whose government is corrupt or ineffective or where the rule of law is not respected is a country whose total factor productivity is lower. Some scholars call these intangible but quantifiable factors social infrastructure, others call them social capital. Institutions are entities, people interact with one another in institution. That's what we will explore in detail next. So basically this chapter tells you क्यों कुछ देश गरीब रह गए, क्यों कुछ देश अमीर हो गए.